This is my first time doing a presentation on this platform, so please bear with me while we go through this together, okay? So in the initial paperwork, they asked me to give this program a title, and I tentatively called it Moving People. And my reasoning for doing that was because years ago, as I was navigating through my career and, moving from being an independent artist to being on major labels and then becoming an independent artist again, I realized, one day I heard a story about Duke Ellington, and it was a story about when Columbia Records fired Duke Ellington, basically. They let him go. He asked the record executives why it was that they let him go. And they said to him, well, you aren't selling any records. And he paused for a moment, looked at him and said, well, I thought my job was to make music, and I thought it was your job, you're the record company, it was your job to sell records. So, thinking about that and hearing that story at a certain point in my journey, I began to really think about what's my job as an artist, regardless of what platform I'm on, whether it's a major label platform, the whole world knows your name, or whether it's, being an independent, just starting out. Now, what is my main purpose? What is my main job? My job, I thought, is to move people emotionally, intellectually. And so I started calling my business Moving People. So you won't be surprised when I tell you that many times when people would see my business card, they asked me if that meant 4 men in a truck, showing up to help them move to their new house. But moving people, became my mission, because I figured, regardless of what your platform is, if you don't move people emotionally, intellectually, then you're not going to be successful in this business. So we started off by calling this presentation Moving People. But as I really began to put some meat on the bones of this original skeleton of an idea that I had, I really started getting a different direction that I wanted to go today. So, this presentation today, I guess, would be called Purpose-Driven Artist, and subtitled, What Are You Looking For? So I'd like to start off the presentation by asking you to focus, if you would, on the center screen. And I wish I could hear you guys so I could know if there's a response or not verbally. Is there a way, Melinda, for me to be able to hear people's voices?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, you guys can hear me. Good. Okay, good. All right. So I want to ask you to do sort of a test with me, and this is kind of our warm-up test, if you will. And the test is, I want to ask you, when you look at this image, do you see a profile, or do you see a half of a face? And just go ahead and speak up and tell me what you see.
Changes back and forth for me.
Okay.
I thought it was a profile.
Okay, so that's kind of our warm-up. So now what I want to do next is I want to ask you to tell me the name. Let me find my way around here. I want to ask you to tell me the name of this actress. And we should be there. Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. There we go. Tell me the name of this actress. Anybody tell me her name? No? All right. Well, I pulled a little trick on you. I deliberately asked you the name of the actress because I wanted to direct your attention to the image. But just tell me, is there anything else you see up here?
Horses.
Okay.
Bird.
How many birds do you see?
6. 9.
9. That's 9 is what I got too. So now, just really quickly in your mind, I want you to switch back and forth between seeing the face and seeing the other images, seeing it a different way. Kind of fun, isn't it? That we have the power to change our vision almost transparently, so that we don't even know the difference necessarily between when we shift from one to the other. So I thought it'd be fun to start this off today that way, because I wanted to illustrate, really in an experiential way, that what we look for is what we tend to see. And what we see, I know you'd agree with me on this, unavoidably impacts what we believe. Okay, and then what we believe inevitably impacts choices that we make. And the choices that we make, every one of them leads to outcomes. And those outcomes become our stories about our journey. They become the answers to the question that we might be asked by someone else. And the question is, so tell me what happened. So, our vision affects greatly, ultimately, the outcomes that we have and the stories that we tell. So, real quick question: when I'm talking and the cartoon space for me speaking is on the screen, does that blur your guys' ability to see the slide?
No.
Okay. So, I love this next slide. Take a moment, read that. And I found it and made me laugh. So said another way, if you will. We have all faced some difficulties that have impacted our vision. Am I right about that? If I am, please tell me yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to ask also your forgiveness for the fact that I'm not looking at you and utilizing my avatar, because I'm like a first-time driver. I'm like a student driver who's trying to learn how to remember where the brake is and where the clutch is. And if you're under the age of 15, you probably don't know what a clutch is. But anyway, I don't mean to be rude and turn my back on you. It's just the way that I need to navigate this for now. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. So I want to ask you, any guesses? And thank you for getting involved with me here today verbally, because if you talk to me, it'll be better for all of us. So any guesses on who the young man is with the long hair? Anybody have any guesses?
You?
Yeah, just me. And it seems like I'm just hearing from Melinda. Does nobody else want to talk?
I do, but it feeds back.
Oh, okay. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Michael.
Okay, does it help if my
No, because we can't hear you.
would it help would it help on the feedback if I use the number 1 button, or does that matter?
Maybe so. Yeah,
Okay.
it's feeding back now.
Well, let's try this now. Okay, so any guess that you're right, that is me. I was 15 years old. Any guesses on who the man is next to me?
Your dad.
Right, that's my stepdad. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story. Remember the cartoon slide we saw a moment ago with the guy with an axe in his head? And the doctor said, you may want to get a second opinion, but I think your vision might be blurred. Well, it's sort of a metaphor, if you will, that there are things that happen in our lives that can blur our vision. So this is me at 15. And what was going on in this picture, around the time of this picture, was another in a long series of tragic events that happened in my family growing up. So I guess the short version is that my parents, multiple divorces in my family when I was a kid growing up. I was labeled a slow learner in school. I had really a lot of trouble reading, had trouble with reading comprehension, had a lot of trouble with math. And, because of that, I grew up, probably my greatest handicap, I thought, was that I started to think of myself. My vision of myself was that I, wasn't that smart, that I had some real challenges. growing up in my family, there was, unfortunately, and I share this because, I know that I'm not the only one, but there was incest in my family. There was sexual abuse in my family. When I was 15, my birth father was murdered by his business partner. In the year that followed that, probably no surprise looking back on it emotionally, I ended up running away from home. I ended up in juvenile detention. I was failing school. Got into high school, went through high school, started turning all of that around. And 2 weeks before I graduated high school, Dennis, who was my stepfather, actually he was my adopted father because he adopted me after my birth father left. But this fine gentleman that I'm standing next to in this photograph, he committed suicide in an argument with my mom, and I found him. So, as I turned 18, there were a lot of days, as you can imagine, there were a lot of days when I really felt like this, and those days didn't go away quickly. They were an axe in my head, so to speak, for a very, very long time. So looking back, I can tell you that second to shift. Looking back, I can tell you that there was really no need for a second opinion. What I lived through profoundly affected my vision about my family, about love, about my future, about myself, my worth, my trust in other people. So I went off to college and played college football. And after I got out of college, I ended up joining a group of athletes who were going into schools, public high schools and middle schools, junior highs, sharing motivational, inspirational messages. And that's me, right kind of in the center, just to the right of the big guy in the center in the front. That's me. And this was a group of guys called the Power Team. And my job in college, I played football. I played for a national championship college football team, and that was how I, sort of had my credibility, if you will, to be a part of this team. And so my job was what we did was athletic feats of strength to get kids' attention and sort of a wow factor, and then then we would, once we had their attention, we would share a message with them. So this is a photograph of me, probably 1985 or 86, setting an unofficial world record for breaking almost 5 feet of concrete in my head. As you can imagine, it's no question why my vision was a little blurred in my life, literally, if not just figuratively. So one day, while I was, doing this job, this, probably was 23 when I started, my boss got sick, and I was asked to speak, fill in as the assembly speaker. So I'd been preparing for this, getting ready to speak when I had my chance to do it. And I had a whole bunch of really good stories that I was going to talk to the kids about, to share. And these were other people's stories. I shared the O.J. Simpson story, which at the time, O.J. Simpson was still considered an American hero who had overcome rickets when he was a kid. He had rickets, which had terribly deformed his legs. I told the Wilma Rudolph story. Just great stories of people who've done inspirational things in their life and had gone on to accomplish, in spite of their circumstances, really become world changers. And, I can tell you that I flopped. I was not received well. I couldn't hold the kids' attention, and it just didn't do very well. But I was always one of those kids that if you threw me in the pool and I started to drown, he pulled me out, I'd jump back in. So tenacity, was helpful for me at that point. So I did this several times, flopped several times, and tired of flopping, I thought, well, my stories just aren't working very well. So I took a risk. I decided that maybe I should try to share a little bit of my own story. So I was stunned at what a difference it made. Standing in front of a group of people, speaking from my heart, telling my version of the truth, what I lived through. You know, in spite of all I went through, I had, come to a place of some health in my life and had begun to experience some success. I was unaware of the impact that would have on the audience. I just knew that people were paying attention. And so at the end of the program, when so many people, I mean, just dozens of kids came up to me after the program, and I just listened, and they began to say things like, "Well, thanks for sharing your story. I thought I was the only one who'd been through sexual abuse. Wow, thanks for sharing your story. My dad took his life last year." And it was like a wake-up call for me. And, I realized that every audience that I was ever going to speak to over time, I realized had people in it who were really looking, even if they didn't know how to articulate it, they were looking for some encouragement, a sense of safety, a sense of trust or love or acceptance. And I realized it's something even as seemingly as insignificant as a smile or a laugh could really make a positive difference for somebody else. And so in the context of that, doing this on a regular basis, I began to make this the focus of my professional pursuits because it was so rewarding for me. Feeling that I felt, when I would speak to young people and they would share that it just made such a difference for them. So this is a picture of me. I was 23, 24 years old, and just I was on my way. So I experienced firsthand in doing this, that the stories I had told myself prior to making this discovery, about my past, if you want to call it my hindsight, I began to realize that my vision of my past had been pretty skewed towards, sadness and anger and mistrust. And those were pretty much the stories I would tell. And I realized that as I began to look at more things that happened in my life, not just the negative things, but so many of the positive things, I realized that my hindsight, my vision of myself and what I thought was possible for myself, could be bigger, could be broader. And so changing the way that I looked at my wounds literally began to change the outcome of my life. And just from sadness and anger and mistrust to the possibility of something good coming from things in my life that I'd been ashamed of or embarrassed of. And I guess the best way I know how to share, really in a short way, what happened to me is share with you one of my favorite sayings. See, I began to accept this saying. It really says it all for me. That while none of us can go back and have a new beginning, none of us can go back and change what happened. None of us can go back and have a new beginning. But every one of us has the power, again today, create new endings. And boy, I got to tell you, beginning to live that way, it took time. It took years for me to navigate my way to a place of really living in the fullness of that. But as a result of that, of improving my vision, if you will, I had the privilege, and I have had the privilege, sharing 30 years of priceless moments, combining music, art, speaking, media, and more, with people all over the world. And sometimes over the course of those almost 33 years now, I've been asked by aspiring artists how I got a career that was sustainable in music. And over the years, I've come to feel that what they're really asking me, what they really want to know, is how they can have a career in music. So usually when I'm asked that question, I respond with a few short stories, and I close by saying, I can only tell you what happened for me. And there are a few principles that I feel were instrumental in helping me, in spite of all the challenges that come with any person trying to build a career in the music business. You add in all the personal challenges that I had or you may have. There are some principles that I found along the way that have been instrumental in my journey. And what you do with those principles that I'm going to offer you today will become your story, so that someday when somebody comes to you and they ask the same question, hey, how did you become successful? And what they really mean is, how am I going to become successful? You'll be able to share not necessarily my principles, but some principles that you found looking back on your journey that were really helpful for you. So that's what I want to do with the rest of our time together today. Is that okay with you guys? That sound like a good idea?
Yes, sir.
Do it.
Okay. So, well, I love this. I love this slide. And when I first found this slide, it used to say "created for a purpose," and I'm mentioning that because I went into Photoshop and I got rid of the D, because this really said more what I was really focused on. But just for the record, I believe, and it doesn't mean that anybody else is wrong if they don't believe what I believe, but I believe that we were created for a purpose, that we're not here by accident. And I believe that one of the reasons I was created was to create for a purpose. And there are as many different purposes as there are creators. So each creator most likely has multiple. Those purposes, like we'll all have multiple purposes, and those purposes are fluid over time. And they change according to new priorities or what your sense of your calling is. But no one of us has an inherently higher calling than another person. So I'm just sharing with you what I felt my calling was. Otherwise, if everybody had the same calling, the world would be a pretty boring place. So what do I mean when I use the term? What do I mean when I use the term purpose-driven artistry? Well, what I mean by that is that my vision for my life purpose was born from the experiences that I shared a few moments ago. So for me, music, speaking, performing, using media, humor, stories, they've always been tools that help me scratch that itch that I have felt in my life consistently, to embrace the possibilities that life would present to me to help other people in need. Probably was dressed up most of the time, probably looked to other people as me pursuing a career in music, especially once I got to Nashville. Most of my friends that I was growing up with that had aspirations to play and to do music, they were busy playing in bar bands, playing at fairs. While they were doing that, I was busy creating and delivering hopeful messaging in prisons, schools, churches, retirement homes, juvenile detention centers, boys and girls clubs, and a lot more. And in these places that I was presenting myself, I discovered that I had a specific target for my creations. And I had endless opportunities to exercise my vision, see where it fell short, and to try again. While many of my friends with career aspirations in music were auditioning for talent buyers and waiting for that talent buyer to tell them how much money the talent buyer thought they were worth, while they were busy doing that, I was simply busy trying to do what I call improve my serve. Right? I was looking for people who were helping, hurting, and discouraged people. And those people that I knew would be praying and hoping for a touch of inspiration and help in their life. So in that space, I had to make a living. Well, money, while it was important, was never really the primary goal for me. Not sure why exactly. It just never was the bottom line for me. It was an important byproduct, but I discovered early that there were a number of endless opportunities to serve people, right? But finding money, like somebody say, hey, give me money and then I'll work. Those opportunities, everybody seemed to be competing for them. But man, if you just showed up and said, hey, I'm here to serve, how can I help? And didn't make money the top priority, there was an endless number of opportunities and there was a lot less competition. So I was never short of opportunities. And while my musical peers were out busy hustling Holiday Inn gigs or playing smoky bars for drunks until 2 a.m., I never made money a prerequisite. So the net result of this approach was that I had little competition, a lot of opportunities to improve my skills as a communicator, a singer, a recording artist. But it also meant that I had a lot of people who, although well-meaning, had less faith in my vision than I had. See, I was starting to develop a vision, like, this is my calling in life, okay? So one of my favorite authors is a guy named Frederick. And Buechner tells a story that pretty much sums up those kinds of encounters that I had with naysayers. And maybe you run into people like this as well. So I'm going to read you this story. I've paraphrased it a little bit to fit my message. Buechner says, quote, I hear you are entering the music business. The woman set down the long table, meaning no real harm. She said, was it your idea or were you poorly advised? Well, the answer that she could not have heard, even if I had given it, was that it was not an idea at all, neither my own nor anyone else's. It was a lump in my throat. It was an itching in the feet. It was a stirring in the blood at the sound of rain. It was a sickening of the heart at the sight of misery. It was a clamoring of ghosts. It was a calling, which when I wrote it out in a dream, I knew was a calling worth dying for, even if I was not brave enough to do the dying myself, could not even define the calling for sure. What do I mean by calling? Well, the word calling comes from the Latin word vocare, V-O-C-A-R-E. This means to call. And it means the work that you were born to do and fulfill. Now, there are all different kinds of voices calling us to all different kinds of work. The challenge is to find out which is the voice of destiny rather than of society, say, or strictly of your ego or your self-interest. By and large, a good rule finding out what your calling is this. Your calling will be the kind of work that destiny calls us to do. And that would be the kind of work that A, you feel the need most to do, and B, that the world needs most to have done. So if you get a kick out of your work and so do other people, well then presumably you've met requirement A. But if your work is writing TV deodorant commercials, the chances are that you've missed requirement B. All right, the world doesn't necessarily need that. But on the other hand, if your work is being a doctor in a leper colony, or singing songs to men in prison to lift their spirits, you've probably met requirement B. But if most of the time you're bored and depressed by whatever it is you're doing, chances are that you've not only bypassed A, you probably aren't helping other people that much either. He closes by saying, the place that destiny calls you and me to is the place where our deep gladness finds and meets the world's deep hunger. Man, I love that. So there's so much that I want to share, but for now, as we go through really the last 30 minutes of my time with you, and then if we have some time for Q&A, great. But I want to share with you 4 principles that I see consistently as I look back on the past 40 years of my career in music. And then we'll close with some Q&A if we have time. So I'm going to walk over here and see in front of this. There we go. So I'm going to be on this screen pretty much for the rest of the time. So, recognizing all of that was to give you an idea or a sense of where I'm coming from and how I really have, what has driven my career. Like, why have I made the choices that I've made? And for me, being famous or making a lot of money, just never my driver. I was really driven by a passion for people, the experiences I had as a kid, and my empathy for other people, and the healing that came about by taking something that I thought was shameful or, embarrassed by in my life, things that happened to me, finding out that they had some value. There was some redemption in that. And then my other great passion has been songwriting and music. I just eat it, dream it, sleep it, breathe it, and I have really since I was probably about 14 or 15 years old. So the combination of those two things have really been the foundation upon which I have made so many of my decisions. So I had some mentors along the way, and one of them was my grandmother. When I was about 14 or 15, my mom got religion, and which is nothing wrong with that. But at 15, when you have a collection of rock and roll records, Black Sabbath, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, Rush, and you come home from school one day and your mom has broken all your records because she's worried about the devil being in the house. That is very, very disconcerting. So in the middle of that one day, that's exactly what happened to me. My grandma called and she said, "Hey, your mom is pretty upset about your records." I didn't know what to say, but I knew my grandma was great. I loved her. She loved me. I felt safe with her. So she said to me, she said, "Don't worry about it." She said, "From now on, just bring your records over to my house, and we'll go from there." So about 6 months went by, and I saved up enough lawnmower money to buy some new records, and it's the ones that had been broken. So I showed up at my grandma's apartment, and I knocked on her door. She lived in a little two-bedroom apartment. And I knocked on her door. She let me in. She saw me just standing there with the albums in my arms, and she said, "Well, let's see what your mom's so upset about." So we walked over to her closet in her living room. Remember, it's a small apartment. And she kept her record player. Remember record players, right? It says how old you are. Her record player was one of those portable ones, the ones where you could fold up the top, attach the speakers to the side, and sort of carry it like a suitcase. So she opened up her closet, she opened up her record player, and she said, "Why don't you put one on?" So I put on my favorite album. It was an album by Led Zeppelin. It was Led Zeppelin 4. And I remember, putting the needle on the vinyl, and it started to play. And it was loud, and I was aware that she was in the apartment. So I looked up at her. I said, "Grandma, is that too loud?" And she did something that I'll never forget. She reached right over my shoulder, and she reached down to the volume button, and she cranked that sucker way up. And to this day, I'm still not sure if she dug it or if she was hard of hearing. But what happened next blew my mind. So I sat on the couch. That song ended. I took it off. She went to the closet. She put on it by Patsy Cline. I'd never heard of Patsy Cline. So I got up after her record was done, and I put on a record. I put on the only record I could think to put on. I put on Black Sabbath. And we started a dance. I would play a record. She would play a record. And this went on from the time I was 15 to the time I was 30 when she passed away. I'd go to my grandma's house. I would share my dreams, my heart, my visions, and I found a place of acceptance. And it was really, really vital for me to have that. And I remember one day, approaching 30 years of age, I said to my grandma, "Grandma, I want to be in the music business." And I remember she looked at me and she asked me a question. She said, "Well, how long do you think it'll take you to make it?" And when she asked me that question, I got this little knot in my stomach because, when somebody asks you a hard question like that you don't have a good answer for, right, you can get a little nervous. I stood there for a moment. I said, "Grandma, I don't know how long it'll take me to make it." Then she asked me another question. She lit up a cigarette. She opened up a Coke. She leaned across the counter of her kitchen and she said to me, "How old will you be in 10 years? If you have to face rejection, you have to face failure, you have to struggle at every turn. How old will you be in 10 years if you don't give it a try?" And I realized at that moment what she was saying was, you'll just be 10 years older, right? And still not have that dream. True, no chance of it happening because you didn't try. So I felt emboldened by this. And as we closed that conversation, she shared with me these closing words. She said, listen, Michael, she said, here's what you're going to do. I want to invite you to do. She said, go out and play music. Play if they like you, play if they don't. Play if they pay you, play if they don't. But go play. So the first principle that I want to offer you that has been consistently helpful to me when I have faced difficulties or challenges or uncertainties, which has been more often than not. I think that's the way it is for all of us. I could hear my grandma's voice saying to me, get busy doing the thing that you're called to do, whether they pay you or they don't, whether they like you or they don't. So I did that. I've done that, and that has been it's opened up so many doors because I was using my gift, and my gift made a way for me, right? My calling made a way for me, and yours will make a way for you too. Second principle I want to offer you is improve your vision, right? So if I hearken back to how we started the presentation today, I think it's really, really clear that no matter what we look at, there's always many ways to perceive what's happening, right? And often we only see what it is we're looking for, right? So whatever difficulty or challenge that you're facing right now, is there another way to look at it? Is there an opportunity in the midst of that most people are missing because they just aren't stepping back to try to look at it in a different way? There's a great author that I love. His name is Og Mandino, and his book, The Greatest Secret in the World, had a profound effect on my life. And one of the things that has really stayed with me from his readings is he says that every heartache, problem, or discouragement is really an opportunity, guys. So the principle, number 2, is this. Whenever you face an obstacle, heartache, challenge, stop for a moment. Instead of focusing on just, the woman's face or the birds, right? Instead of focusing on the troubles or your sadness or your discouragement, look for the opportunities. Most problems, heartaches, and discouragements always have opportunities in the center of them. So let me give you an example from me on a personal level. In 2004, I was in my second record deal with Sony. And, without going into a long story, not today, maybe another time, I ended up losing my record deal with Sony. And this was on the heels of a 3-year publishing deal where my publisher was counting on that record on Sony coming out. So I'd made a record, Sony wasn't going to release it. And as a result, I had, at that point, 3 years of nothing but red ink on my publishing deal. And it was a large publishing deal. It was about $150,000 a year. So at that point, I had almost $500,000 in red ink in my publishing deal. I had no record deal. And so when a record isn't coming out, you don't have a new record, you don't have a record deal, and you don't have a publishing deal anymore, the talent buyers to buy you, and they don't want to pay you as much money as they were before because they know you don't have a new record coming out, and the dominoes just start to fall. And so for me, in a very short order, less than a period of about 6 months, I guess, what had looked like a very secure place for me literally almost evaporated overnight. And I was stunned at the turn of events, and I was overwhelmed, honestly. And when I looked, all I saw was discouragement, heartache, and challenge. But something in the middle of that in my life whispering to me. And here's what it said. It said, begin to read. So I started reading. And while I was reading, I found this story about Abraham Lincoln. It said Abraham Lincoln, no, worst part of the Civil War. He didn't know what to do. He faced incredible discouragement and odds against the nation being saved. It said, and this is a quote from Lincoln, Lincoln said, "I fell to my knees because there was no place else to go." When I read that, I felt like that. So I did that. Fell to my knees. And I said a prayer. I said, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Whatever it is you to make my phone ring and bring my way, I'll do it. I'll say yes." And again, it's a story for another day because I only have about 18 minutes left. But I can tell you this. I began to say yes to every opportunity that came my way. And the opportunities that came my way, very few of them had any money attached. People started calling me, asking me to help them do fundraisers. People started calling me and asking me, basically to support their ministry or to help them raise money to help handicapped kids or anything you can imagine. And I remember about 6 months that I said a prayer. I know I probably should have asked you for a paycheck when I said that prayer. Did I make a mistake? But these things kept coming my way. And I can just tell you in a short version, all of that giving of my time for service led to 3 of the biggest financial deals I ever did in my life. I ended up with $1 million deal with a tractor company called New Home. I ended up with $1 million deal with the U.S. Army. And I ended up with a $500,000 deal with the Madison County, Alabama County Commissioner's Office over the period of about the next 5 or 6 years. The most money, just to put it in perspective, the most money I ever made from selling records was less than $100,000 because of the way the contracts were. So falling to my knees and going and improving my serve, finding ways to serve people, going back to the principles I began with, which was, I'm not here to chase money. I'm here to serve people. And doing that, all of these doors began to open, which led to a financial abundance, which I had never had in my entire life. And, I'm convinced that it started with improving my serve, right? Instead of looking for deals, I began to focus on improving my serve. And I know probably maybe some of you are thinking right now, like, well, what does that have to do with being an artist? Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of artist is. I saw that I had a calling. My calling was to use my artistry to help others. And so if you're going to be an independent artist, not on a major label, trying to make a way for yourself, make a living, you can set yourself apart and make yourself unique by finding ways to find that intersection where your talent and your passion meets with other people's needs. What'll happen in that place is you'll discover that you're not just one thing. None of us that are watching this right now are just a singer or just a songwriter. You're many things. And I discovered that I was really good at writing copy because I was a writer. I wasn't just a songwriter, I was a writer. I was really good at communicating with people. So I was a communicator. And I realized that music was one of the tools that I used to communicate. But I also was a strategic thinker. I had the ability to think about strategies and plans to help people. I was also an empathetic person who had a sincere, authentic concern for other people and their well-being. I was also a willing learner. So I was willing to get in and get my hands dirty to learn about these organizations. I didn't know anything about farming when I started. But I said to the guy that was the decision maker, when he asked me what I wanted, I said, I want to learn about agriculture. That's how it started. When I went to the Army, they said, hey, will you come and serve us? I said, I don't know enough to know how I could even be of value. But if you'll give me time to hang around and learn, then we can revisit that later, whether or not I have any value for you. So those things showed up for me, the willingness to learn, the willingness to serve, the recognition that I had many talents and skills, and music was just one of them. Because I had a broader vision, right? Vision of my talents and myself, I was able to stay on purpose with my calling. And for me, that is a foundational principle of a purpose-driven artist's life. Okay, so third principle, be what you want to become. That's a great principle. Sort of act as if. So one story that came to my mind when I was thinking about this was I was in my mid-20s and I hadn't really had any big success yet. I probably wrote about 30 songs a year. And I kept these notes, and I could show them to you maybe another time. But every time I wrote a song in a notebook, at the very end of it, I would write down my copyright information. I'd write my name. I would write Circle C, put a copyright in there, the name of my publishing company. So I treated myself like I was professional, even though I wasn't yet, right? So I remember one day I was sitting in an airport, and this guy that I knew that was a big deal in the music business walked by me to catch a plane. He stopped to talk to me. And we weren't friends, really. Just a guy that I knew. And he came over and he said, "What are you doing?" I saw him writing, and he looked at me. He saw that I would write at the bottom of my page, And in a really condescending fashion, he looked at me. It was hurtful to me. He said, "What do you think you are, a professional?" And it really hurt my feelings. But it stuck with me that I should act that way. And whenever I would go to Nashville and begin to try to lay the groundwork for what my vision was, I always tried to show up, looking as the way that I wanted other people to see me. And because of that, standing in a Shoney's on DeMundrian Avenue, a guy came up to me who was a senior vice president at BMG, and he said, "Who are you?" Which led to a meeting in his office, which led to all kinds of incredible doors opening, simply because I looked like a star to him. All right. And I can give you similar stories that happened before before the big break happened for me. There were many times when, because I looked a certain way, somebody stopped and asked me, which led to a meeting that became very instrumental in my story and in my journey. So last principle number 4. I think, let me look back at this for a minute. So I said improve your vision is number 2. Play is number 1. Improve your vision is number 2. Number 3, be what you want to become. Act as if you're already there. And the last principle is this: improve your serve. Don't just improve your vision, improve your serve. So here's what happens. Here's what happened to me when I began to just look for people to serve. And this was long before I ever had hit records. This is in my 20s. When I just began to look for people to serve, I discovered all of these things happened. Number 1, I had a lot of opportunities to improve my skills, right? Because if you're new at swimming, the only way you can learn how to swim and improve your skills, you got to be in swimming. So you improve your skills when you look for people to serve, because there's plenty of opportunities. 2, you demonstrate your value. So many people never get to experience other people's value because that person says, "I won't show you my gift unless you pay me," right? But when you walk in and you say, "I'm here to serve you," people get a chance to experience your value, right? Number 3, you develop a reputation, right? And your reputation becomes word of mouth. And that word of mouth grows your opportunities. So all of that stems from the willingness to not put money first, but to say, "How can I serve you?" Right? And you're going to receive along the way some money. That's part of the deal, right? But you don't always receive money. In fact, for years and years after I got on my knees, probably 75% of what I did, because remember, I'd made a promise to God. 75% of what I did was what I called play checks. Well, in the paycheck is a play check. And a play check to me was this. Number 1, I was having fun with the people I was with. Number 2, I was making friends. Number 3, we were making a difference for people. And you would be surprised if I had the time to tell you today, and I don't. You would be stunned if I told you how many of those I went to where I went to serve people and I didn't make a penny. Well, they paid my expenses, but I didn't make any. It was every big deal that came out, the 3 big deals I told you about, every single one of those came from a place where I went to serve. And I walked away with a play check, not a paycheck. But months, maybe a year or two down the road, that same person I served got a chance to experience my gifts, got a chance to experience my value, right? I got a chance to build a relationship with every one of those people. Those three of those people, not every one of them, but three of those people came around with bigger opportunities that led to tremendous blessing in my life. But every one of those people to this day remains a friend, somebody that has respect for me, that knows my gifts, and is my word of mouth advertising to their friends. So you may not always receive a check, but there's always value to be had in using your gift in a way that answers your calling. That's what my calling is. Your calling may be way different, but this isn't the only way to build a sustainable career in the music business. But I can tell you this: in 30 years, I've made 18 albums, right? I've had 4 major record deals. I've had 2 major publishing deals. I've written number 1 songs, 13 number 1 songs on major album charts around the world. I've written songs that have been recorded by Hall of Famers and Grammy winners in 7 categories of music. I can't talk about it right now, but there's an amazing opportunity that's happening for me, unfolding for me right now, that has to do with a new record contract in a whole new environment. I've toured all over Europe. I've had the time of my life, and there's never been a time since I got to Nashville in 1996 that I have had to do something other than this for a living. And I'm convinced it was because of my decisions to go about answering my calling and making that my highest priority. So those are my 4 principles. In closing, I want to leave you with this. In 1990, late 95, early 96, I was out of money, I was out of patience, and I was really ready to do something else. I went and applied for a job with the Seattle Police Department. I took the physical exam, I passed it, I was getting ready to take the written exam. I was just so discouraged, I was ready to give up. And in the middle of that, coming into Christmas, I was running out of money, I didn't know what I was going to do, I had a young family. I got a phone call. The phone call was from somebody that I'd never met. The guy was working for a guy named Bill Gaither. If you know Bill Gaither, he's a gospel music publisher, probably the most successful of all time. And they called me to tell me that a song that I'd written had been chosen by the Imperials. They were a gospel award-winning gospel group. And they wanted to record the song. I had no idea how they got the song. It was a song I'd written 10 years earlier. It was a song I had pitched 1,000 times to publishers, people who were the experts, supposed to know a hit when they heard it. And nobody had passed on it. And in the process of those 10 years since I had written that song, I had put that song in a pile with a bunch of other songs. They were all the songs that had been rejected. And they, to me, were my evidence based upon other people's opinions that my talent wasn't good enough yet, right? I saw myself that way. That was my vision. This phone call, they said, they want to record this song. You know what? Not only did they record it, it became their first single, and it went to number 1. And it made them the only group in history to have a number 1 record in 4 consecutive decades. Now, I don't say that to brag. I say it to put the button on the end of the story. And the story is this. On the heels of that happening, there I sat with a number 1 song. And a little voice whispered in my ear and said, "Wow, you've been a hit songwriter for 10 years, and you just didn't know it." And I want to say to you today, whatever it is you have done that you've worked on, I hope you've saved it all. Because sometimes we discard too easily our work because other people don't respond. And God knows why they don't respond. Maybe it's not time yet, but save your work. Because it could be that you've already done your best work. Just the world hasn't recognized it yet. As I look back over the last 20 years, most of the songs in my catalog that have been recorded from songs that were rejected, right? So that's how that's gone for me. I have had an incredible life. I'm not in the spotlight anymore, and I'm okay with that. I've always been okay with that, really. My heart's desire is to serve, still is today, and that still is opening doors, creating an incredible story. I hope this has been of some value to you today. We have about 4 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, maybe I'll have some answers. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for, just enjoying this first run on this format and me trying to navigate through all of that. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
When you coming to Nashville?
I'm coming to Nashville hopefully sometime in the spring. Is that Larry Butler who Stan Moress?
Yeah.
Hey, Larry.
Pleasure.
Thank you for being here. So my home come to Nashville in the spring. Hopefully things will open up more at that point.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I am too. Probably many of these seminars that you'll go to over the next few days or that you'll attend are kind of how-to seminars. Today, for me, I took a little different approach. And my approach is to say, these are some principles that have been how I became successful and was able to sustain a career as an independent artist. And really, if I had to sum it up all in one sentence, it'd be tough to do, but it would probably be this. Go find relevant places that may not be in the spotlight and typical. And you will grow. And as you grow, your reputation will grow and it will make a way for you. And over time, you'll have principles that show up for you and you'll have a story to tell. And that story might be inspiring to other people. I can't tell you what's ahead. I can only tell you what I've been through. That's what I've been through. It sure has made an incredible life for me. So thank you all for being here today. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Michael. That was awesome.
Thank you, Vinny. I put my hand up because I was trying to just wave. I think that was a hand up that said, give me attention. So let me do it. There you go. Okay. You guys have a great day. You guys have a great day, and we'll talk soon.